In the hit movie American Made, Tom Cruise plays Barry Seal, a thrill-seeking pilot who smuggles cocaine for the Colombian cartels.
Barry Seal could fly anywhere. He could land just about anywhere. He knew his craft very well.
The CIA recruits him to fly daring missions, but it's not the real story.
There's no credible evidence that Barry Seal was ever a CIA asset.
But he was the biggest drug smuggler the US has ever seen.
He was a master criminal. He would smuggle anything from cocaine to marijuana. He did it all.
When Seal's caught, his life falls into the hands of two government agencies. The CIA, fighting the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, and the DEA, chasing Colombian drug kingpin Pablo Escobar.
He was the best informant they ever had.
This is the incredible life of the legend behind American Made. This is the real story of Barry Seal. Barry Seal's life started to unravel the moment Randy Beasley came looking for him. Beasley's been tipped off this is the place to find the smartest drug smuggler in Baton Rouge.
Barry Seal.
Adler Berriman Seal is known as Barry, a skilled pilot and adrenaline junkie. His ears prick up when Beasley says he needs help flying 1,200 pounds of Quaaludes out of South America.
He was always a guy who didn't think the rules applied to him. He thought he was smarter than everybody else. He had that arrogance that he could master any situation.
Seal boasts about running $1 million drug smuggling operation, flying cocaine from Colombia to the US.
He did tell Randy the routes he flew and the airplanes he used and why he was successful, that he bragged about it.
We have routes no one has down to yet.
And he gave away a lot of good information.
He feeds false rumors he works for the CIA and is protected by the government.
I'm protected by the CIA.
The story gives him an air of invincibility, and he starts believing that he's untouchable.
Stay safe, Barry.
He shot off his mouth to somebody he shouldn't have trusted, but did.
Seal doesn't know it yet, but he could face up to 10 years in jail.
Baton Rouge office, please. This is Special Agent Randy Beasley.
Seal's just spilled his secrets to an undercover DEA agent working on Operation Screamer, a mammoth sting targeting drug pilots.
I got the whole thing on tape.
When Seal started his career in his 20s, flying for Trans World Airlines, he could have gone all the way to the top.
He was the youngest TWA captain they ever had, which has to do with his capacity as a pilot.
But eventually Seal grows bored with the routine. And when a new acquaintance presents Seal with an opportunity to smuggle explosives, he jumps at the chance to make an extra buck. But his first foray into smuggling is a failure when he's busted in a customs sting. And although the case is dismissed in court, his career as an airline pilot is over.
He couldn't get a job with an airline again. Back in those days, he was pretty well paid. When he lost his job, his lifestyle had to remain the same. He had a wife and kids. He also had to make a living to support his family.
Theirs was a very strong and powerful love affair. She worshiped Barry. She thought the world of him.
He wanted to make sure that his family was cared for. So when he lost his job, he went to the next best thing, which was smuggling.
He came along at the time that the drug trade in South Florida was really taking off. And there were a lot of people coming into the trade just for the fun of it.
After cutting his teeth smuggling marijuana, Seal quickly graduates to cocaine.
Cocaine, just by volume, is so much more lucrative than marijuana. 300 kilos of marijuana, that's not bad, but 300 kilos of cocaine is millions of dollars. That's why these gifted pilots all ended up moving from marijuana to cocaine. The money was just too great.
In just 3 years, Seal builds up a first-class smuggling operation. With a fleet of planes on a private airstrip 20 miles southeast of Baton Rouge.
He could have run an airline, probably. In fact, well, he was running an airline. Let's put it that way.
Seal figures out ingenious routes to get cocaine into the United States from Colombia. By flying over the Gulf of Mexico and along Louisiana's Gulf Coast. And brilliantly perfects the smuggling business using all the tricks of the trade. Flying in the dark with lights off and night vision goggles on. Passing low and slow to avoid detection.
Across the Gulf, his planes were often mistaken for helicopters. There's a lot of drilling rigs out in the Gulf. There's a lot of helicopter traffic between the rigs and shore.
Seal is careful not to get caught with the drugs he traffics. He uses swamp airdrops, bribes officials, and covertly exchanges the drugs for a cash delivery fee. But in 1979, the Honduran authorities find a firearm on board his plane, and he gets locked up in Central America. But he turns it to his advantage and makes a contact that connects him to the Medellín drug cartel in Colombia.
He was perfect for what the Medellín cartel at its inception needed, which was skilled pilots who were willing and able to go into some very rough territory.
When Seal starts smuggling for the biggest cartel in Colombia, he hits the big time, making his family very comfortable.
He was the kind of man who would come up in a period where you could be a smuggler and a family man. He viewed it as being a provider. On his son's 15th birthday, he gave him $10,000 in cash in 20s. And you have to be a bit of a family man to be that generous, but also he had the money.
And the money just keeps rolling in, despite the continuing US war on drugs.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
Say yes to your life. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
I think Barry's view of smuggling was, you know, how much worse is marijuana and cocaine than alcohol and tobacco? He had that kind of viewpoint on it. And I think he felt like he was providing very well for his family.
To protect himself and his family, Seal keeps his identity secret. He has no direct contact with the drug cartel bosses, and the Colombians know him only as El Gordo, the fat man. He makes all his communication through payphones.
You always knew when Barry was coming because you could hear all these beepers going off by the time he hit the door.
He had a pager, and whenever anybody would call his answer service, he'd get a page, and he would go to the nearest payphone, which they had back in those days, and return the calls.
He makes sure his employees don't know each other.
People on the ground didn't know who the pilot was, allegedly. The pilot didn't know who the people on the ground were. Nobody knew when the load was coming in except the pilot and Barry. So by cutting down on the number of people involved and knowing what he was doing, when it was going to happen, he had a good chance of not getting caught.
Seal thinks he's outsmarted them all.
All the police knew this guy is up to something bad, but they could never really catch him.
He had the brains, the guts, the will. He loved the game with the cops. He knew they were watching him. He knew they were trying to catch him. And he loved the fact that he could do this and they couldn't catch him.
Officer, arrest me. Go on.
But he's not as smart as he thinks, because Seal has been under surveillance by the DEA and the FBI for years.
We had 10 payphones being monitored. That's a lot. You know, we didn't have any more equipment to handle that many phones.
This is why Special DEA Agent Randy Beasley has been called in to sting Barry Seal once and for all. And now Beasley has solid evidence of Seal telling him all about his drug smuggling operation. The DEA has him exactly where it wants him.
I got the whole thing on tape.
The sting results in a federal grand jury in Florida returning an indictment against Seal, and he's ordered to appear in court. After spilling the secrets of his well-honed drug smuggling operation to an undercover DEA agent, he's charged with conspiring to possess and distribute Quaaludes. In court, the charges against him are laid bare. But Seal thinks he's indestructible and won't take the bond hearing seriously. He tells ridiculous lies.
He's smart enough not to say I'm a smuggler, so he has to come up with something and maybe start accounting for some money.
Oil and shrimp dealer.
He claims he's an oil and shrimp dealer with annual earnings of just $250,000. But in truth, in 1982 and 1983, Seal imported 5,000 kilos of cocaine and grossed $25 million. Seal is confident. There's no way he's going down. But the jury finds him guilty. It's a bullet between the eyes. Seal is staring at a 10-year sentence. A family man at heart, Seal can't bear his wife Deborah seeing him locked up as a criminal.
He didn't want to go to jail at all, and most people don't. But he was looking at substantial time. He didn't see his kids. I mean, it's not like he was some ogre that didn't love his kids and wife. So I'm sure that bothered him too.
He makes a last-ditch plea and offers to become an informant for the DEA. Seal is dismissed as a consummate liar. But Bob Jura, new to the DEA's Miami division, is willing to take a chance. Jura and his partner Ernst Jake Jacobson decide to question Seal about what he can actually offer.
What you want, Barry? I've got whatever you like.
Bob Jura was a very experienced agent, very professional. Jake Jacobson had been in U.S. Customs. He had a little bit of a temper, but he was a really good guy. He had the ability, as a fellow Southerner, to relate to Barry Seal, to make Barry Seal feel comfortable.
You want the top one.
If Seal can deliver, they could stop the flow of illegal drugs into the country and make names for themselves.
Tell us something we ain't heard.
Seal looked like a hot mess. He was fat, he seemed to be undisciplined in the way he conducted himself, and he did some crazy things, or at least he said he did.
The classic Barry Seal kicked into operation, which is, I can find a way out of this. I'm going to be the best informant they've ever had, and I'm going to be such a good informant that I'm not going to have to spend a day in jail. So that's when, the gears started working. Hey, I've got a lot to trade here. I have a lot of information, and I can give them a case that they've never seen. I can outsmart everybody once again.
Just when Seal is out of time, he takes one last desperate gambit and says he can deliver the DEA's most wanted.
I can get you Pablo Escobar.
Seal told a lot of stories. The most enticing and ridiculous was that he could get Pablo Escobar, he could get him on a plane and take him someplace where the DEA could arrest him. Escobar was notoriously slippery, surrounded by his own large army. So the idea that Pablo Escobar would get on an airplane with Barry Seal and fly away. That was pretty crazy.
The agents are intrigued by Seal's claim. If true, this could be the opportunity they've been looking for.
You have to try and verify. You can't take them just at their word. You have an obligation to find out if they are telling the truth or if they can do what they claim they can do. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
But in the end, they looked at his actual record, and they found it credible that he wasn't using drugs. And they had to weigh things. Is it worth taking a chance with this guy and sending him back down to Latin America? Had many debates about it and ended up saying, well, let's give it a try. What else we got?
As Seal talks and talks, the agents gradually become more convinced.
Things that he said checked out. He could be corroborated. They started to see Seal as a man who could produce hard evidence.
They were staring at the kind of case that would change their career. And I think they knew it.
Put your money where your mouth is.
The agents tell Seal to call up the Ochoa family direct. But in truth, Seal has never had any direct contact with the big dogs. He's lying again.
The DEA wanted to see if he could produce his promises. I mean, it sounded unbelievable.
Seal calls his contact for the MedellãCartel and introduces himself under a fake name, Ellis Mackenzie.
He picked up the phone and he says, I want to talk. I want to go to the top. I want to hold more and more and more.
We got the big one.
Seal says he wants to start flying more than 300 kilos of cocaine in one go.
He knew he was dealing with people who needed somebody like him. He knew that he offered them something that was very valuable. They needed money. They needed their cocaine to be moved.
The contact is interested and agrees to set up a face-to-face meeting with the cartel bosses. Against all odds, Seal has pulled a rabbit out of a hat.
Seal was going to try to get the heads of the MedellãCartel in a place where they could be arrested.
While the DEA agents make Seal no promises, they agree if he can deliver, his sentence would be significantly reduced.
The idea was if he made the biggest drug case ever, he probably wouldn't have to do much, if any, time. And that was his goal. I mean, he was staring at a 10-year sentence.
Seal has successfully bought himself more time, and his sentencing is withheld to see what he can do for the government. Now officially a DEA informant, Seal goes out on a limb to prove himself.
And so he went from a very successful bad guy to a very successful good guy. And he put the same amount of energy into trying to atone for his sins and get himself out of trouble that he'd put into getting himself into trouble.
If he was the best and smartest smuggler, he was going to be the best and smartest informant. So he was entirely professional. He also knew his life was on the line, but he still took incredible risks.
Seal's enthusiasm for his new role knows no bounds. He self-funds his missions, uses his own planes, and buys his own fuel.
All these guys are adventure junkies. Everybody wants to be a pirate. All little boys, when they're little, they want to be a cowboy, they want to be a pirate. Adult pirates. Nothing else changes. But flying into the Ochoa estate, into the heartland of cocaine country, was just fabulous. It was a coup.
He was flying incredibly dangerous missions into the heart of the cartel and their estates. Las Loma, he went there. He went into the belly of the beast.
Push up, hands up! Hands up!
going down there to meet with them in person. You know, he didn't know that he wouldn't be compromised.
On your knees.
He didn't know that he could be stepping into a death sentence.
Under the alias Ellis Mackenzie, Seal is introduced to the heads of the cartel, Jorge Ochoa and Pablo Escobar.
The Medellin cartel were known as the most ruthless criminals, perhaps in the history of the world.
Ochoa tells Seal they've been stocking up to supply crowds attending the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles.
And they knew that there would be a great demand for cocaine. So their plan was to get 3,300 pounds into Miami and then get that west to Los Angeles and make a fortune. And this would have been a very big score.
It's more than Seal's ever trafficked in one go, but he agrees willingly.
It was a sign of his desperation, his willingness to do this, their desperation, their willingness to take this risk because they needed to move these loads of cocaine. They needed Barry Seal, he needed them. And it was clearly now on the knife edge of life and death for him.
And the stakes are about to get even higher for Seal. The Colombian government has declared war on drug traffickers, and the cartel is desperate for a new location. The Sandinista government in Nicaragua has come to the aid of the MedellãCartel and offered a protected hub for its drugs.
They had a new base and a new partner, a new ally in their smuggling, and it was the Sandinista government. So their plan was to essentially use a Sandinista military base as a transshipment point for their cocaine, which would allow a much better refueling situation and which would provide them security at a time in 1984 when they really needed it and would have provided the Sandinista with funds that they could have used.
The cartel bosses want Seal to fly their drugs via this Nicaragua base. It's a dangerous demand because the new Sandinista government is officially a communist enemy of the United States.
My fellow Americans, I must speak to you tonight about a mounting danger in Central America that threatens the security of the United States. This danger will not go away. It will grow worse, much worse, if we fail to take action now. I'm speaking of Nicaragua, a Soviet ally on the American mainland, only 2 hours flying time from our own borders.
In an effort to overthrow the Sandinistas, the US is funding a local militia, the Contras, but it's highly controversial.
The question the Congress of the United States will now answer is a simple one. Will we give the Nicaraguan democratic resistance the means to recapture their betrayed revolution, or will we turn our backs and ignore the malignancy in Managua until it spreads and becomes a mortal threat to the entire New World?
Only 2 hours away from our borders. All of this, only 2 hours away from where we live. Support the president on Nicaragua. Here is terrorism we can do something about if we support the president on Nicaragua.
By promising the cartel he'll fly into Nicaragua, Seal will put himself in the middle of a brewing and potentially deadly conflict between his own country and a Soviet-backed revolution in Central America. But the operation is put on hold while Seal attends court to be sentenced on his drug smuggling charges. He's confident his status as an informant will keep him out of jail. Until the judge shocks everyone.
10 years minimum.
The judge or the officials weren't aware that he was involved in a live DEA operation.
His DEA handlers fear they've lost a highly connected informant in the midst of pulling off the biggest US case of its kind.
It was a frantic period because this incredibly intense undercover operation is going on.
Jura and Jacobson pull out all the stops to get Seal released on an appeal bond. His unexpected release is sure to raise suspicions that Barry Seal has flipped. But Seal is still bound to continue his undercover work. his next mission to Colombia could be his last.
If you break one rule when you're a DEA informant, all bets are off. The whole deal crashes. So he took it very seriously because that was his one ticket to a lighter sentence and freedom soon.
As Ellis Mackenzie, Seal continues smuggling for the cartel alongside his trusted longtime co-pilot, Emil Camp. Neither Camp nor the cartel have any idea Seal is really working for the DEA.
They knew who Ellis Mackenzie was, they knew who the El Gordo and the Fat Man were, but by keeping the names separate, it was hard for them to know that Barry Seal was the person they were dealing with.
But the Colombian drug cartel's demands just keep getting bigger.
Weight is everything when you're smuggling any drug. And Seal was always very cognizant of that.
Barry apparently told him, no, we can't do that, the plane's overloaded, which supposedly was waving a machine gun and said this flight's gonna go. So Barry, against his better judgment, tried to take off, and the way I understand it, he was on a dirt strip. It was sloppy, muddy. The plane could not get up to speed to take off, and it crashed.
You're right.
Luckily, Seal and his co-pilot escape without injury. Ochoa provides a second plane that fares better with the extra load. But their flight hasn't been cleared with the Nicaraguan authorities. They're fired on by an anti-aircraft battery.
The fixer apparently neglected to tell the Army that Seal would be taken off with a load of dope. He didn't get killed, but it probably scared him a bit, even though he's a good pilot.
Seal is forced to make an emergency landing, and yet again ends up in jail, this time in Nicaragua. Back in Florida, Seal's DEA handlers reach out to the CIA for help tracking him down. It's a mistake that will cost them their mission.
The DEA didn't know whether he was dead or alive, so they went to the CIA and said, you got connections down there. Find out if this guy named Barry Seal is dead or alive or in jail. And that's when the CIA first heard about him.
The CIA is fascinated to hear there's a cocaine operation in Nicaragua. If Seal can prove it, there's an opportunity to discredit the Sandinistas.
The national security team of the Reagan White House was looking for every opportunity to get damaging evidence against the Sandinistas. So any chance to show that the Sandinistas were not only murderous but corrupt would be excellent. To do that, the CIA desperately wanted photographs because corroboration is terribly important. Having some fat guy come back from Nicaragua and say, hey, I met with the Sandinistas, that wouldn't carry any water. It would not influence American opinion, but people were terribly upset about cocaine, and this was an opportunity to influence the American public.
This would have been a very important part of the propaganda war. See, not only are they communists, but they're communist drug smugglers, which made them even worse. So it would have been a giant propaganda coup.
After spending the night in a Nicaraguan jail, Seal eventually gets released. But not by the CIA, by Federico Vaughn, a Sandinista official and friend of the MedellãCartel. Seal flies back to the US in one of Escobar's planes. When Seal returns to the US, the CIA has hatched a plan to get proof linking the Sandinistas to illegal drugs.
Barry Seal played into this policy by being on the ground and possibly able to provide evidence of the Sandinista corruption, particularly photographic evidence. So that's why the CIA proposed that it attach a camera to the plane that Seal was flying.
Despite Seal's protests, cameras are attached to his new bigger plane, the Fat Lady. This is the only direct involvement the CIA ever has with Barry Seal. If this risky mission goes wrong, and the drug lords figure out what Seal is up to, it's game over.
He would have ended up without a head, disemboweled, hung from a tree, God knows what, and it would have happened very slowly.
He knows how the Ochoas deal with informers. But the drugs cartel is now the least of his problems. Seal's on the front line in the US war against communism. With no alternative but a prison sentence, Seal sets out on his mission to double-cross one of the most dangerous regimes in the world. With no protection and accompanied by his long-term employee, Emil Camp, Seal lands their new bigger plane, the Fat Lady. It's capable of transporting 24,000 pounds of cargo. The men are surrounded by Sandinista military on an isolated jungle airbase. There's no way of knowing they won't end up shot dead on the spot. But it couldn't turn out better when Federico Vaughn appears with Pablo Escobar.
Lo and behold, there's everything that he'd hoped for. The Sandinista officials, Sandinista soldiers, and Pablo Escobar. They got 1,500 pounds of cocaine, which they load onto the airplane. And he gets photos.
At any moment, the cameras could be discovered. The tension is unbearable.
You can imagine, here you are in the middle of a jungle with a bunch of dedicated killers and illegal government officials, and you're taking pictures of them. It had to be a very high adrenaline situation.
Astonishingly, Federico Vaughn and Pablo Escobar help load the plane.
Why would Pablo Escobar load a duffel bag of cocaine on a plane? He had to have been caught up in the moment. It had to have been viewed as kind of a ceremonial thing, like a dignitary hitting a ship with a champagne bottle. Same with Federico Vaughn. They could have had soldiers do that.
Escobar and Vaughn are both caught red-handed on camera, along with Seal.
They trusted Seal. They thought they were 100% safe.
The photos will cement Seal as the DEA's #1 informant, but they will also signal his end. When the DEA agents see the photos, they celebrate. It's proof their man Seal has delivered, and it's only a matter of time before he leads Escobar to somewhere they can arrest him. But events are about to overtake them. When Washington sees the pictures of Federico Vaughn loading drugs bound for the US, excitement levels hit the roof. It's just what the government needs to discredit the Sandinistas.
It was a little too much for everybody. It was the most sterling evidence you can get of drug smuggling. Here's the drug smuggler loading the plane. Here's a picture of it. Here is the Sandinista official next to him loading the plane. It was too good to be true. It ended up burning a hole in the investigation.
Seal is enjoying his success as the DEA's top informant when he gets the worst news of his life. Details of the mission have been leaked to the press, and Barry Seal is outed as a DEA informant.
There was a great deal of anger about that certain people in the government disclosed it against the knowledge and against the promises to Barry that it wouldn't be disclosed.
The DEA is furious. The story has blown the cover of a mid-operation informant, positioned to make one of the most significant criminal drug cases in American history.
Barry Seal almost brought them the cartel on a silver platter. If there had not been a leak of his mission in that Washington Times article, they might have captured all of them in 1984. That would have changed history.
But for Seal, it's game over. His mission with the DEA is dead in the water, and the CIA leaves him high and dry.
CIA often burns assets. The intelligence gathering mission is considered far more important than individuals.
Worst of all, the cartel now knows Seal's identity and puts a bounty on his head. $500,000 dead, or $1 million alive.
The MedellãCartel was very violent. It didn't matter who you were. You crossed them, you got in your way, you were dead.
Seal's roller coaster ride as an informer has put his family in grave danger.
When Seal realized that he was a target, and he would have known that immediately because he knew the cartel, he put his family into hiding.
But Seal can't go into hiding with them because he's due to appear in court. There's nowhere to hide in the packed Louisiana courtroom. And it's clear the judge is unhappy with Seal's plea deal.
When we got to court that morning, the courtroom was full, and it was full of policemen. Louisiana, high-ranking policemen. State police, FBI, DEA, and U.S. attorneys. They're not all coming down to court to watch Barry Seal be told he's going to be on probation.
Even Seal's Florida DEA handlers can't get him off the hook.
Barry had said, these two guys are the guys I'm working for and they'll help me. And then they got sent home. They didn't get to testify.
But because of Seal's plea agreement, Judge Polizzola is unable to incarcerate the drug smuggler.
The judge did not like the deal. But after vigorous arguments by the federal prosecutor, he grudgingly accepted it.
Instead, the judge gives Seal the toughest sentence he can. 6 months probation in Baton Rouge, with no guns and no bodyguards with guns. But even worse than that, he orders Seal to reside at a Salvation Army Community Treatment Center. The final nail in the coffin comes when the judge reads out the address to the open court. The Salvation Army Community Treatment Center on Airline Highway, Baton Rouge.
He said where the community service was going to be, and that would identify where Barry Seal was each and every day. And that was a terrible, terrible error. The cartel had representatives there, so you can only call it a death sentence because once the cartel has your address, where you're staying, that's it. It, in fact, was a death sentence.
Seal has no choice but to stick to the terms of the probation. It takes just 3 weeks for the inevitable moment to come. Barry Seal dies instantly when 7 .45 caliber bullets hit his head, chest, and neck. the Medellin cartel successfully took revenge for what it considered the ultimate betrayal. The disgraced airline pilot who turned to smuggling to provide for his family and made a fortune trafficking cocaine before cutting a deal with the government to escape jail is now dead.
When he died basically broke. Supposedly, he used a lot of his funds to do the things that he did for the government. I don't think they could get money to pay for him to do the stuff that he was allowed to do.
It's believed Seal's family were left to survive on his life insurance.
The IRS seized everything, I mean, down to the water in the refrigerator, I believe. They took everything there was. But he did get his life insurance. It turns out that even for taxes, they can't take your life insurance. So he had a pretty good life insurance policy, and I think that's what has sustained his family since then.
Although Seal never took down Pablo Escobar, he died the DEA's #1 informant.
He was really the first informant who penetrated the cartel inner sanctum, and he brought them the biggest case they'd ever had. These were unprecedented feats of daring do and law enforcement ingenuity that the DEA had never seen. So clearly, up until his death, he was the best informant they ever had.
A month after Seal's murder, President Reagan displays the photos on national television as ammunition in the U.S. struggle against communism.
The Sandinistas have even involved themselves in the international drug trade. I know every American parent concerned about the drug problem will be outraged to learn that top Nicaraguan government officials are deeply involved in drug trafficking. This picture, secretly taken at a military airfield outside Managua, shows Federico Vaughn, a top aide to one of the 9 commandantes who rule Nicaragua, loading an aircraft with illegal narcotics bound for the United States. No, there seems to be no crime to which the Sandinistas will not stoop. This is an outlaw regime.